Representative Rubel, you are back.
Excited to be back. That was so much fun last week.
Yeah, we had a great time, but we were really short on time. Today, we're not that short on time, and more things have happened, specifically Medicaid expansion. What was it? The Department of Finance or Budget Office or something determined that we have lower sales tax revenue than we were anticipating. So JFAC is still stuck on what the estimated budget is going to be or what the estimated target's going to be. And we're getting data back from our collections agencies essentially saying like, hey, we did not get as much money as we thought. And, you know, obviously I had Representative Mike Moyle in here yesterday, Speaker of the House. He's very excited about tax breaks, but like balancing the budget and making it all happen with like, how are we going to give tax breaks when we're coming up short theoretically? Man, a lot to talk about.
So much.
Let's hit Medicaid expansion. Now, there are a lot of people on this issue. Some people want to repeal Medicaid expansion completely. Some people want to add a work requirement into Medicaid expansion. Some people don't want to touch Medicaid expansion in its current iteration and keep it going. Help me understand what's going on. If you're listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other audio-only platform, please jump down and give it a quick follow and a review. The Ranch Podcast is the only podcast in the state of Idaho that has access to this many Idaho leaders, and your support is greatly appreciated.
So there was a bill introduced, maybe a month ago that was just straight up on its face Medicaid expansion repeal. And that kind of went over like a lead balloon. We got 1,000 emails saying don't do this. So what they did is they brought in this bill 138, which was marketed as a reform bill. But let us be clear, it is a straight up repeal bill. The one that was the big kahuna today that we were in there for, I think, more than 3 hours with lots of testimony. I mean, hundreds of people signed up. And it was marketed as a reform bill, but it was actually a repeal bill. Okay. It was just kind of, repeal in reform clothing. But what this bill was...
If I may ask, you're telling me. Okay, yeah. Why is it a repeal?
It's a trigger bill that says, unless you can do these 11 things, Medicaid expansion goes away. So it says that the default is, unless you can leap through these 11 rings of fire, Medicaid expansion will be repealed. But when you look at these 11 things, they are completely infeasible. Most of them are illegal. Some of them have been requested before and were turned down by both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. If they ever were granted, they would go to court because they're clearly not compliant with the Affordable Care Act. Some of them require federal courts to reverse themselves. It's just a series of things that are completely implausible. I would liken it to basically, unless I can fly a unicorn to the moon and back in 24 hours, then Medicaid expansion is repealed.
Farting rainbows the whole time.
Exactly.
Okay, can you give me an example of one of the things that you're like, you can't do that, that's illegal?
Yeah, there's a number. Well, so one of them is a court one. It says that if any court says that transgender treatments and, hormone treatments must be covered by Medicaid, then Idaho's Medicaid expansion gets repealed.
And is that any courts in the nation?
Yes, most of them. That has already been ruled on by federal courts, including by the very conservative Fourth Circuit Court, which covers like West Virginia and South Carolina and some pretty red states. So that is the law, according to federal courts, is that if you are transgender and you're on Medicaid, they have to give you your hormone therapy treatments. So basically, one of the things is that the federal courts would have to reverse themselves in order for us to keep Medicaid expansion. No reason to think that's going to happen. We have no control over that, totally out of our hands. Some of the other things, it says that the feds would have to grant us a waiver allowing us to move everybody who's 100% of federal poverty line, between 100 and 138 of federal poverty line, we'd have to be able to move them to the exchange. That doesn't fly under the Affordable Care Act. It's not revenue neutral. It wouldn't be granted. It's already been turned down by the Trump administration and the Biden administration. No state has gotten that. There's absolutely no reason to think we would ever get that.
I'm sorry. What is revenue?
Yeah.
You got to talk to me like I'm five. You got to.
No, I don't, because you know everything. I know you.
Listen to me. So there's a discussion with like, look, we want to lower the threshold of income, or we want to essentially establish, look, if somebody's here at this income level, they're not going to be on Medicaid. They're going to go to the exchange. And the idea is if we can take them off of Medicaid and put them onto the exchange, we could purchase a private plan on the exchange for them for cheaper than what we're paying for the Medicaid, or analogous costs, something like that.
That's the theory.
That's the theory.
But it has never been granted because the numbers don't quite work out that way. When you move over to plans on the exchange, at that level of plan that you can afford, it would have a ginormous deductible. You'd be looking at like a $10,000 deductible that this person in poverty couldn't possibly afford.
Which was the whole nature of Medicaid in the first place.
Exactly.
If you're only making $25,000 and you have a $10,000 deductible, you in effect don't really have medical insurance aside
Exactly.
from catastrophic, like huge car accident or something.
Exactly. And then you would lose your house trying to pay the deductible. So it has to be, in order to get a waiver, you have to show to the feds that it's revenue neutral and provides the same coverage and all that. You can't do that with moving these folks from a Medicaid plan, which has no deductible, to a plan on the exchange. It just doesn't work. So this is why it's been turned down. We've had an appeal. We've had that request out since 2019. It has never been granted. Similarly, now maybe work requirements will be granted at some point. We've had that request out since 2019. It was turned down by the first Trump administration and by the Biden administration. And it's not, there are a lot of problems around that one. It's actually very costly, surprisingly. It doesn't save you money. You'd think it would, but it really doesn't, because you end up having to hire all these people to police it and chase people down for the paperwork and confirm whether they are or aren't working. And actually, most of the people on Medicaid are working anyway. So you don't end up pulling very many people off of Medicaid. You just spend a ton of money policing it. So it doesn't save money, but it hasn't been granted by the feds, and we've been trying for 5 years. So so
the idea was, okay, unless we get this work requirement, then it's off.
Yes, and that plus 10 other things. So the work requirement
plus
is actually
the transgender ruling in federal courts in
Right.
states outside of Idaho that we can't affect, plus the work requirement that we also cannot affect because it's up to the Fed, plus the income threshold to show revenue neutral transition from Medicaid to private plan. So like just those three
Yes.
things, you're like, these are impossible because one, the numbers don't pan out. Two, we can't affect federal court. And three, we can't force the federal government to grant us a work requirement.
And there's 8 other equally impossible things. So that, again, you'd have to, send a 747 through the eye of a needle in order to be able to keep Medicaid expansion. So it is repeal. It is repeal. They want
brought
to
this one
fudge it,
forward?
but it's repeal. It was brought forward by Jordan Redmond. It was brought by an out-of-state, Republican think tank who is here. They're actually testifying for it. They flew their person in from... There I go with the hand talking, whacking microphones. But they flew the person in from the East Coast somewhere, from whatever, smoke-filled out-of-state room that hatches these things, and they're trying to shop it in all the red states. And so they try, but it is repeal. It's straight up repeal. We shouldn't fudge that.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Okay. I try to have a really awesome conversation with every single representative, senator, Idaho person that comes through my door. I really try. And I know I don't always hit the mark, but I was thinking today as I was grabbing coffee, because there was this guy in this really fancy suit at the coffee shop right in front of me. And I was like, he's got to be a lobbyist. We were at Dawson Taylor. I was like, he's got to be a guy. Right. And I have started thinking, it's okay, if I'm for Idaho, do I care about having an edgy conversation with an out-of-state lobbyist? What do you think? Should I lower my threat? Because for representatives or even Idaho people, it's listen, I'm here for Idaho. If you're an Idaho citizen worried about something, you come in here and you're listen, I'm worried about this thing. It's let's have this conversation. But for some dude from the East Coast, I don't care if it's a right issue or a left issue, but a lot out-of-state lobbyist that lands in my room, I feel like it should be daggers out.
I agree. It's driving me bananas. And things have changed so much since I started this, 10 years ago. It used to be that we would have bills driven by actual problems that the people of Idaho would have. A constituent would come to you and say, hey, I've got this problem. Can you come up with a bill to solve it? Which was great. And those were the days. I wish that's how we brought bills.
Right.
Now it is just nonstop onslaught from some dude from Virginia or Maryland or wherever who's got something that they're shopping and trying to shove down everybody's throat from coast to coast. And they're just coming into Idaho and saying, here's what you need, Idaho. You got to pass this bill. And that is where most of our bills are coming from right now. Most of the bills that we deal with are boilerplate that was cranked out from 3,000 miles away that nobody was asking for. And, then we're on defense because they got more money than we do. They got some slick communications operation. And we are trying to stand up for the people of Idaho against some often terrible idea that's getting shoved down our throat from across the country.
This is so wild. I was having a conversation with, again, Speaker of the House Mike Moyle yesterday, and he was talking about the concern that people have about the ballot initiative process with out-of-state manipulation. And it's okay, I understand that. People are worried about, and one thing that was really cool is hey, that initiative bill is looking to increase the threshold of voters to get something passed from 50 to 60%. And I asked him, look, do you know of any ballot initiative that passed that was bad, that was between that 50 and 60% threshold that would show this is this one passed at 56% and it was totally detrimental to our state. And that's a a perfect case study for why we need to increase it. And he said, he was like, I don't quote me on this. I'm not like a ballot initiative expert, but no, I don't. He said he didn't know of any. I was like, okay, fine. But I also wondered, okay, if we're going to have a conversation about checks and balances, about outside influence with regard to the ballot initiative process, what are we doing to stop the lobbyists coming to lobby for or against something with our representatives? Because you're saying that the citizens get manipulated, which I'm sure, like, I don't know anything about it. If he says a bunch of outside money came, we see it with every time primaries and generals come around. Like, there are crazy, flyers that go out. That's a ton of that's outside money. So, like, great, let's not have our citizens manipulated by that. But what about like our elected representatives being hosed by the lobbyists?
Exactly. I mean, that is ridiculous to try to confine that discussion to ballot initiatives. We absolutely should, if that were the theory, we should absolutely have a 60% threshold on any voucher bill, because that is 100% being driven by out-of-state and out-of-state money.
I'm not advocating for changing the voting within the legislature. Right. I'm just saying, like,
well, why wouldn't we? If that's the logic, why wouldn't we?
Look, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I don't know what to do about lobbyists. Like, I understand people are saying, hey, this out-of-state money is manipulating our populace. And I agree with that. But, like, what do we do about the out-of-state money that goes into the state house?
You're dead on. And way more goes into the state house than goes into ballot initiatives. And way more goes into just regular elections. I mean, I can point to 8 races where people lost the race because a tsunami of out-of-state money came in to attack them.
Sure.
I mean, it's driving half the bills that we're looking at right now are driven by some out-of-state think tank. And it's very frustrating that this argument is like, oh, there's out-of-state money, so we need to squash ballot initiatives. But not at all look at the fact of, like, okay, there's out-of-state money completely infiltrating and contaminating our normal legislative process.
Right.
Nobody's saying we ought to do anything about that.
Well, I think Representative Moyle did mention, like, we have something there. I don't know all the details, but it is a question of mine. Anyway, so the bottom line is the Medicaid reform bill that came forward was dead on arrival if you want any version of Medicaid to continue existing. Now, what was the debate on the floor or within the committee today?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's, there was a little bit of fudging to say, no, this isn't repeal. But I think by the end of it, everybody got that this was a repeal bill. But there were a lot of very, very right-wing people on that committee who want to repeal it. That is the Republican platform. If you signed your oath to the Republican Party platform, then you have pledged to end the Affordable Care Act, which includes Medicaid expansion. And there are a majority of members of that committee who have signed that pledge. So it wasn't a huge surprise. But let me tell you, the people, we had 265 people total that signed up either with written testimony or to testify in person, and that testify against this bill, to speak out against this bill. There were 8 in favor. So 265 to 8. And the committee went with the 8 over the 265. And this is, this passed with 61% support back in 2018. Since then, the polling's only gone up. It's got 73% support in the last poll I saw. People do not want Medicaid expansion repealed, but you would never know that from what happens in the legislature. But, lots of personal testimony on how important this was to people and their families and how they would lose all coverage without it. We had a lot of fiscal information, which was really interesting, because part of the narrative around why they want to repeal Medicaid expansion is, oh, it's so expensive, we got to rein in the cost, out of control costs, blah, blah, blah. When you really look at the numbers, you will see that it will cost the average Idaho taxpayer more to repeal it than to keep it. And when you add it all up, there was this great economic analysis done by an economist from U of I who showed basically we're bringing in $1.5 billion of economic value a year through Medicaid expansion. It's yielding around $50 million a year in revenues to the state. We have $80 million of savings throughout the systems throughout the state. We would be looking at losing 9,600 jobs. It would be a huge economic hit and a hit to taxpayers. We would lose more in savings essentially and lost revenue collection than what we are laying out for the state's portion of Medicaid expansion.
Well, look, you just said a lot of things, and I caught like a third of them. And again, I don't know anything about the economics of this. What I do know is that it cost Idahoans roughly $100 million. And for that $100 million, Idahoans, the state, gets roughly $1 billion worth of value in medical care.
Exactly.
Right? Because the federal government picks up the other $900 million. Now, some people have said they're very concerned about that 90% match going down to 80% or 70%. I understand that, but it's my understanding of right now as it stands today, not like this could happen in the future, but right now We pay 100 million and we get 900 million in value. So if that's where jobs come from, but like just that multiplying factor, it's like, that seems like a lot. Now, I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but like that seems like a 10x, like we're getting 10x value on what we're putting in.
You are exactly right. That is what we should be looking at. And it is a screaming deal that we would be insane to turn down. And if someday the feds change it, we can have that conversation then. But right now, it's still 90-10. But, you know, you're exactly right. We pick up about 100 million in terms of what we pay to cover it. But we get $80 million of savings in other parts of the system in terms of not having to have the catastrophic fund that used to have to cover uninsured people and savings.
Yeah, because the state ultimately picks up a portion of that cost.
Of uninsured people.
Completely uninsured. So like we eliminated an $80,000 line item by picking up 100 million. So the delta is really, if you just look at those two things, the delta is only 20
But there's more, you're exactly right, but there's more than that. Because as I said, there was this economic analysis that showed, because when $1 billion of federal money goes into the state, that fills our coffers in other ways. It makes jobs. People are paying income tax on that money. They're paying sales tax with the money that they get. You know, they get it pays the doctors, it pays the nurses. They go buy stuff. They buy groceries, and boats and whatever it is they buy. They pay income tax on it. So it yields, and they pay property taxes. So that billion we get in from the feds yields another 47 million in revenue to the state. So we've got 80 million of savings plus 47 million of revenue. So we're getting 127 million. So we're paying 100 million to get 127 million plus insure 100,000 people. We would be insane, just on a pure fiscal level, just putting aside all the human misery and the people that are going to die and not have their illness treated, just purely fiscally, we would be bonkers to walk away from Medicaid expansion, given the current 90-10 breakdown that we get from the feds.
Look, I'm a terrible person. Okay, so let's say I just sit here, I'm like, I don't care. Let people pull themselves up, by the bootstraps, you get a medical ailment, that's on you. I could still say, hey, if there's a machine where every year I can put in $100 million and I get $127 million back, like if Warren Buffett could do that, he would be all, like I'd be all in. 27% return annually, year on year on year. At that point, I ask like kind of, hey, if I give you $1 billion, can you make it $1,270 million?
Yes.
Like that's a great return, just the way. And again, maybe there are other aspects of it. This is not something that, Representative Moyle brought up. He was like, it's costing us $100 million and he's not a fan of it. It's like, okay. And he was bringing up the other aspects of it. But again, just from the information you're providing me, like that sounds like a great return.
It is. So just purely fiscally makes zero sense. But beyond that, so let's just say you're, some meanie pants who doesn't really care if people are sick or insured or whatever. And you're just like, I just care about me and my family. It's going to hurt rich people who are on private insurance, because what happens is you've got these rural hospitals in areas where you have a lot of poor people, and they're going to have like 40-50% of people showing up if we yank Medicaid expansion with no insurance whatsoever. And they're going to have to eat a lot of that cost. It was driving these hospitals out of business. They can't keep operating with 40-50% of people unable to pay their bills. So they start laying off doctors, they start scaling back operations, they start shutting their doors completely. That is no bargain for the rich people in the area, because no matter how rich you are and you have fabulous private insurance, if there's no hospital there and there's no doctor there, you are going to be hosed when you fall off a ladder or have a heart attack. So it really diminishes the quality of care for rich people too when we force these hospitals into closure. So, I mean, there's a million angles on this thing, but all of them are really clear that we should be keeping Medicaid expansion. And yet this bill to repeal it passed on an 8-7 vote out of committee today.
The doctors not getting paid and then eventually walking from the hospital is that's a real huge problem. And people don't understand. I mean, and look, I'm not in the medical industry, right? I have family members are, but the paradigm shift is essentially, okay, look, somebody has to get out of bed at 2 a.m. Go do an appendectomy, take your appendix out, or go do a gallbladder, life-saving operations, by the way. And they go and do this thing at like 2 and 3 a.m. and the person they're working with doesn't have insurance. The idea that it's like, well, you're just going to have to swallow that for the gratitude of this job only flies for so long until people are like, it's 2 a.m. I don't want to do this. And the hospitals are not that. Classically, a lot of times what would happen is a hospital foots a portion of the bill and they get reimbursed from the federal government or the state government. They foot a portion of the bill and then they reimburse the doctors a little bit. The doctors aren't made whole completely. But the point is, like, you look at this whole thing, and when you realize if you're a physician and you're like, all right, I could go to hospital A, I could take call at hospital A and have the privileges of working at hospital A, but I'm going to be up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. a couple times a week doing the stuff that I know I'm not getting reimbursed for. Or I just take call at hospital B, C, D, E, F, and I open my own private clinic and I'm going to get paid for sure. Hospital A goes out of business because they cannot field people to take call and do rounds in their hospital wings. Like, that's what happens. And we can poo-poo on doctors for doing what all of us would do. Cause like, I don't know the last time you showed up for work without getting paid, right? Consistently, right? This is basic economically driven behavior, which is like, if we can't get paid, we are not going to work here. And that's it. Right. And these are real problems that it's my understanding, at least some of these like stopgap programs fill.
100%. And that is what was happening before we had Medicaid expansion. We had some of these smaller hospitals in rural areas closing. We were trying to rush in to stop the hemorrhaging, to stop them all from closing. And that was one of the big goals of Medicaid expansion, was to make sure we still had some hospitals left in those areas. States that never expanded Medicaid expansion, Mississippi has seen basically the closure of all of their rural hospitals. This is not a hypothetical. This is real. It has happened. It does happen. It will happen. And that's one of the big reasons why we did this, to stop it from continuing to happen. But we already have medical deserts in Idaho. We're not great. We have, I think we're 50th in the nation on doctors per capita. That we are not in a position where we should be trying to tank it further.
Yeah. Let's talk about revenue shortfall. Okay. Now, again, we have the Joint Finance and what's the JFAC? Appropriations Committee. There it is. And that's made up of both Democrats and Republicans, and they have to come up with a functional estimate of how much money we're going to have to play with. They have been stuck. I actually saw Representative Ward Enkelking at the, I was getting the coffee. She was behind me. The faux lobbyist was in front of me. And I was like, oh, hey. And I asked her, like, how's that going? Because she's on JFAC and they have been stuck with estimating how much money do we actually think we're going to get? Because once they have that budget number, then, or the estimate of revenue, then they can start doling out money to different places and fulfilling, the, governor's budget or whatever it might be. And they haven't figured out like how much money. There's a portion of people that think it's going to be some number plus 300 million. And then there's a portion of people who think it's just going to be the original number, not plus the 300 million. All of this is going on. And then we find out today that we actually have a shortfall on like theoretical revenues we're getting from different buckets. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild right now. So you're exactly right. They normally are supposed to set a revenue number and say, based on all the economic analysis, this is what we think the revenue is going to be for this. And you don't know for sure, but you do work with the best projections you have. And there's usually a range. Ironically, there's a conservative number. We're supposed to be a conservative state, but they've said they want nothing to do with the conservative number. They want to pick the reach number so that they can, have a justification for bigger tax cuts. But we got information back from DFM, the Division of Financial Management, who's our budget agency that figures all this out. And they track the incoming revenues every month and see, are we on track? Are we hitting our targets? What's income tax looking like? What's sales tax looking like? And we are short of that estimate right now. So even with where we are right now, we are not looking like we're going to hit that reach revenue number that they haven't even committed to yet, because the JFAC has not picked a revenue number, but it certainly doesn't look like we're going to hit that reach number, which is the one they want to declare in order to justify these tax numbers. Then, and that's before you even layer in the pandemonium that's hitting us from the feds right now. So Idaho is a net taker state. For every dollar we pay into the feds, we get about $1.63 back. We are highly dependent on federal money coming in. All of this craters without about $5 billion coming in from the feds every year. And we are hearing all kinds of things like they want to shut down the Department of Education. Okay, so that's going to hit lots and lots of money that we are not going to get for special ed and for all, Title I funds, for all the low-income schools, for free and reduced lunch and kids with disabilities. So if we want to backfill that and still have any kind of special ed, we're going to need more than the amount we think we have. Who knows what they're going to cut off? It was looking like a week and a half ago that all the spigots were going to be cut off. We don't know if they're going to stop funding Medicaid expansion at 90/20. We have no idea what they're going to do. Maybe they won't send us any Medicaid money anymore. So we're in a time of great uncertainty where, if anything, the likelihood is that we're going to need more money to backfill possible gaps coming from the feds. So the fact that we're already short of revenue, just based on assuming we're going to get all that federal money, assuming everything's going to be hunky-dory going forward, there is no reason to think everything's going to be hunky-dory going forward. I mean, again, spigots from the feds possibly being cut off. Other things are in the works, like deporting the undocumented workforce. That's 80% of our ag workforce. Ag is a huge sector of our economy. There is reasonable reason to fear that if one of the largest sectors of our economy has 80% of the workforce deported, there might be some glitches that come out of that. That might not go smoothly.
May I ask, where are you getting the 80% number?
Well, that's what they tell us. That's what, if you look, the dairy say that 90% of their workforce is undocumented. And they say that across ag, that's a pretty safe estimate of around 80%. The construction workforce is around 35%. So a lot of our industries, we don't know what that's going to look like, but maybe it'll be fabulous, maybe it won't. But there's certainly very good reason to think that we could have some big problems going forward in our ability to fund things. And of course, tariffs, trade wars. A lot of these sectors depend on international trade, and that could hit ag pretty hard. It just feels like we're in a really shaky time where we don't know that these incoming streams are very stable, and we already know that they're not because we're already seeing our revenues falling short. So to come in and say, first things first, before we have passed any budgets and have funded any agencies, before we've even set our revenue number, before we have any idea how much money we have in the bank, first thing we're going to do is cut $400 million of revenue permanently. Does not feel like conservative budgeting.
I mean, I'm kind of swimming with all your numbers. I was talking to somebody just a couple days ago, and he said, look, we're shaking things up. Things are getting shook up federally. And that might be really good. It's like things get shook up, things get rearranged, everything's fine. But it's also looking like there might be some broken eggs in the egg carton once you get done shaking it. Like, because you got 100 eggs, you're shaking everything violently. It's like, yeah, maybe 98% of them are going to be good, but you might have 2 that clock heads and then you lose those. And I really just focus on Idaho.
Yeah.
Right? Like I try to really look at this state and everything, but it does appear that there is a lot of uncertainty coming from, for instance, I do some work with a nonprofit and to promote local providers, purveyors of goodness, right? And we collaborate on on podcasts and whatnot, showcasing local proteins or local restaurants, whatever it might be, local recipes, things of that nature. And they were like, yeah, we don't know what's going to happen. I'm like, what's going to happen? Like, you guys are just here promoting, local purveyors of things. They're like, yeah, we know. And we have these grants that allow us to do that, to showcase our local growers and our local ranchers and things. Like, yeah, that we have that money. But if that money goes away, which it looks like it may, or rather, we just don't know. We were planning out, episodes in advance dealing with, the wine or the beef grower, or excuse me, the beef council, like all these different things. Like, yeah, let's get these people on. They're like, yeah, look, we like that. We just don't know if we're going to be in existence to do that. And that was really shocking. It was like, oh, this is really boots on the ground. Like, this is like your next door neighbor works for this thing. And like, that's gone. There is a lot of uncertainty. I can appreciate that.
Well, I love your optimism that if you shake 100 eggs really hard, only 2 are going to get broken.
This is what somebody else said, not what I said. Again, I'm an idiot. I just focus on Idaho. They're like, hey, things are crazy. It's like, okay, I believe you.
Well, Idaho's a little bit of the canary in the coal mine because we are so disproportionately dependent, because we benefit so much more on federal funds. Ironically, California gets way less money. I mean, for every dollar they pay in federal funds, in federal taxes, they get like 50 cents back. So they're actually, ironically, the blue states are going to be a little bit better positioned to weather this storm because they're not quite as dependent on federal stuff. It's kind of ironic. I think it's the red states that are going to get hit the hardest because they tend to be lower income and more dependent on that federal money coming in.
Yeah, we'll see. Schwarzenegger was actually the governor when I was in college. I remember when he became governor, he sent out this message to the federal government saying he immediately wanted more California money back.
Yeah.
Which I thought was Dang, man, that's wild. Yeah, I mean, look, there is that. They also run massive debts, so it's a crazy balance.
Yeah.
Okay, so bottom line is it looks like at first glance we're not going to be bringing in as much money as people thought, at least from and I think you said sales tax bucket. Like what were the buckets coming in that
sales tax is trending downward. We'll know more on income tax. Yes, we're coming up on tax day, and that tends to be kind of a balloon payment. But overall, we are below our targets and projections in terms of revenue collection. And have been for a couple months. So, we don't know if that trend is going to continue. Maybe it'll reverse, but certainly where we sit right now, it does not look like a wise decision to commit to a $400 million revenue reduction. Again, we haven't passed a single budget. Nothing has been approved. We haven't approved an education budget. We haven't approved a revenue budget. This is way cart before the horse stuff.
Man, the education, we can't get into it because my head will explode, but like what a wild situation. Like I don't even know. I actually put out a clip this morning. I had, again, Representative Moylan yesterday. We were talking about Ed briefly, and the NAEP results, the National Assessment Education, it's like, oh my God, like Idaho is top 5 in both reading and math for 4th grade and 8th grade assessment. Those are the 2 assessments they do. It's like we're top 5 in the country on all of these. And anyways, wild statistics to help people understand how proficient our schools are.
Yeah, I really hope that takes some wind out of the sails of the people who are always bashing our public schools. We punch way above our weight. They're not very well funded, nationally speaking. We're near the bottom, but they do pretty darn well for getting scant resources.
You know what? I am pro-education. And if you want to make educational contractors it's like, I'm down for all solutions to get Idaho children as educated as humanly possible. The only thing I ever get hung up on, and I almost never articulate a position, but this one is like, listen, if you want educational contractors, that's fine. Can we just establish that at the bare minimum, they'll hit like the 3 R's? Like if you have a private school that wants to take state dollars and all they do is work from 8 a.m. to 10:30, they're like, listen, our school is solely focused on reading, writing, arithmetic. You want kazoo, you want art, you want bowling, you want sports, you want anything else? We don't do that. We just do this. Or they say, hey, we're 8 to 10:30 on the 3 R's, and then we do nothing but Bible verses the rest of the time until kids leave school. I don't care about that. Just can we establish some fundamental, we have determined this is education. And if you're a contractor and you want to take this contracting money, you just have to do these things. Now you can do other things on top of it, but you got to do these things. It's like, that seems reasonable, but that's not what's happening. Like, it's like, no. Anyway, I can't. Yeah. We can't get down this rabbit hole again. My head starts hurting.
Right. On this voucher bill that went through, I mean, they kind of tried a fig leaf in that regard, and that was the only thing in it. There's no requirements for anything. You don't have to have background checks, certifications. They can turn you away from your religion. They can turn you away for your disability. They can turn you away for anything. But they're like, oh, but there's accountability because look, here's a sentence in here saying you should teach something about math, language arts, and science. But that's it. It doesn't say how much. It could be 1 hour a year. It's just like, try at some point, could be 5 minutes. You don't have to hit any standards, no amount of time. Just, at some point, mention math, which you would never do for public schools. We have requirements a mile long on what you have to do.
Listen to me, we can't get into this.
I know.
My head, it hurts so bad. When people just say well, the parents know. It's like, okay, but how? Just tell me how they know. It's like, well, they get a report card. It's like, okay, can you share the report card with the state? Just so the state, protect me as a taxpayer. If you're taking my money under force of imprisonment, threat of imprisonment, you're taking my money away from me, that I will pay you voluntarily without being imprisoned. Just promise me and verify that this is going to education. However we define education, it's the 3 R's. Say take out one of the R's. It's just like reading and math, right? It's just like, I don't care what you take out. Just work with me here, kind of. Anyway, listen, we can't do this. So we have theoretical reduction in our budget, our incomes, Medicaid expansion. There was another thing you wanted to hit. What else are we talking about? We have time. What do you want to talk about?
Oh my gosh, we have some. Well, I know last week we were going to talk about the same-sex marriage thing, which we never got to. I don't know if that's moving.
Yes. I'm interested in this one. I'm still trying to get an attorney that can, because again, I had Representative Heather Scott on, and she was saying that she feels that the interpretation or scope of of work that the Supreme Court engaged in was inappropriate. And it's like, okay, thank you for your position. I have no idea to verify it. I am trying. If you are an attorney out there hearing this, please come and talk to me, because that's what I want.
I'm an attorney.
You're an attorney?
You're in luck.
Are you like, can you make comment on what the Supreme Court can do?
100%. Yeah.
Oh my, I didn't know this. Listen.
I went to Harvard Law School, my friend. I'm an attorney.
Did you really?
I did.
God, you got to hang out with monkeys like me. Talk to me about this.
Okay.
I really wanted to go to Bolt or Michigan. Those were like the two.
It's not too late. It's not too late.
It's definitely too late. There's no way. The only thing I wanted to do with law would be a law professor. And then I was like, well, listen, if you just want to teach, like just go into tutoring, which is ultimately what I stuck with. Yeah. Harvard Law, man. My uncle went to Harvard Law.
Excellent.
Yeah. Good times. Anyway, talk to me.
Yeah. So, well, okay. First of all, this thing was not
I
as
really
advertised.
didn't know you're an attorney.
It's not that big a deal.
It's not like we hang out and get coffee. Do you have like a firm in town?
Well, I'm of senior counsel. I was a partner at a big intellectual property firm, actually based in the Bay Area, that does tech work for big tech companies.
Oh, that's awesome.
My firm incorporated Apple, actually.
Look at you.
But now I didn't. It was a long time ago. But no, now I'm pretty much spending all my time on the legislature, so I've had to scale down my actual practice.
Okay,
very
so
dramatically.
Talk to me.
Aside, so okay, it was marketed this thing to try to ban same-sex marriage in Idaho. It was marketed as a states' rights thing of saying,
yes,
we're just calling on the Supreme Court to overturn the Obergefell decision, which was the 2015 decision that made same-sex marriage, the law of the land from coast to coast. Right. And she's saying, that's not right. It should be left to the states. And Idaho has a ban on same-sex marriage in its state constitution. Not everybody realizes that. We have a trigger ban in our constitution that if we ever lost federal protection, immediately it could be illegal in Idaho, because that's our constitution says marriage must be between a man and a woman.
Okay, so if they were like today, this second, if they just come out and they're like, hey, that 2015 decision we made, JK, repeal that one, then all of a sudden the next second.
Well, couple things would have to happen.
Okay.
So that would have to happen. And then there was a federal law that Joe Biden signed in 2022 called the Marriage Protection Act, I think, that said that states have to recognize other states' same-sex marriages. So, but if Congress changed its mind, repealed that, and the Supreme Court changed its mind so that there were no federal protections to override and it was all left to states, then there would be no same-sex marriage in Idaho, because our Constitution said. So she was saying, I'm standing up for the Idaho Constitution and against federal overreach. But the funny thing was, what the resolution actually said was not that. What the resolution actually said is it called on the Supreme Court to reverse Obergefell and declare that marriage must be between a man and a woman. So she was saying, we still want the Supreme Court to tell people what to do. We just want them to stick it to Massachusetts and Hawaii. And states that actually want same-sex marriage. So it was still calling for the Supreme Court to override states. It was just saying, do it the other way.
She did not mention that.
No?
She said, listen, we should just allow people to determine what they think on a state level.
Yeah, no, that's not what the resolution said at all. It said the Supreme Court should just rule the other way and override any state that wants same-sex marriage. Now, that said, I fundamentally really disagree with that premise, because marriage has been recognized as a fundamental right. We have a constitution. We're not just 50 loosely affiliated entities. I mean, we have an actual constitution and a Bill of Rights that is supposed to apply from coast to coast and, then some in Hawaii and Alaska. And there are core rights. That's why we fought a civil war. That's why we overturned segregation, is because there are things that a state cannot do when they run afoul of the Bill of Rights. And from many, many, many decades, the Supreme Court has said marriage is such a fundamental right that states cannot infringe it. 1967, the Loving versus Virginia decision, they said states can't have bans on interracial marriage because marriage is a fundamental right protected by the Constitution, and states can't monkey with that. They've even said states can't ban prisoners in prison from getting married. I mean, they've been very clear in lots of contexts that marriage is such a fundamental right. It's like free speech. It's just core to the Bill of Rights, and states don't have the ability to override that. So I would fundamentally disagree with the precept that Idaho should be allowed to just go its own way and override this fundamental right. I think is appropriately protected by the Constitution. But even if you bought her premise, that is not what her resolution says. So it's problematic for lots of reasons. I hope the Senate's not going to take it up, but it's caused a lot of angst. I mean, I've heard from a lot of folks who are thinking, can I still be married in Idaho? What's going on? Do we need to move? Are my spouse and I still legally married? So this thing didn't have legal effect, but it caused a lot of panic and unhappiness.
there were a couple of aspects of the idea. First off, I didn't know about trigger law. I didn't know that it actually asked the Supreme Court to rule the other way. I don't know I don't know anything. But what I have heard from people say is, look, this would not just be like we had the abortion, the Roe versus Wade gets turned over. We had a trigger law. And therefore, moving forward every day, there was law in place that affect anybody who like showed up to a clinic like, I would like an abortion. They're like, sorry, we can't do that unless, these specific things. Right. And there was a revision to that because obviously there was an affirmative defense initially that was placed in the trigger law, and then it became an actual proper exemption. Fine, whatever. But the point is that didn't, like if somebody was unfortunate and felt they had to have an abortion and did get an actual abortion in, let's say, 2020, when that trigger law went into effect, when Roe versus Wade happened, nothing happened to that person. There was no effect on that person.
No retroactive effect.
No retroactive effect.
Right.
If you got married in Idaho in 2016 and this resolution goes to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court is like, hey, we overturned this. And in fact, we do in fact declare that marriage is only a man and a woman. If you were married in 2016, one, what is your marriage status? Two, what is your child custody status? Say you have adopted or figured out a way to have your own children together. Like whatever it is, it's like, hang on a sec. This makes a whole tangled mess of something that every single gay marriage that has transpired in Idaho from 2015 until the day that happened, if it were come to pass, this is not like oh yeah, but it applies with everybody going forward. It's like, no. You have like legally standing right now. This is a problem that now all of these people have to unpack.
Right. And I think it would create a lot of uncertainty for those folks, because marriage kind of requires ongoing recognition. So even if you were married back in 2015, they need to recognize it on an ongoing basis because there's, 1,000 rights that come with being married.
Yeah, that's right. So like somebody ends up, like say it comes past, you have a couple that's, a gay couple that's married. It comes to pass the next day they get in a car accident and one of them's dying in a hospital room. And they're like, who are you? It's like, I'm, her husband. Yep. It's like, well, you can't be her husband because you're a lady and she's a lady and you guys aren't married. It's like, you can't be spouses. Or the next day you have a custody battle. Yep. It's like, wait, if we're not married, who gets to declare this child on their tax returns? Who like say you're splitting up, right? Like you don't have proper custody battles within like family court anymore because you're not technically married, right?
Or community property rights,
right?
Or inheritance rights, the ability to inherit your spouse's property on a tax-free basis,
right? So
the ability to collect their veterans benefits or their Social Security.
So it's an ongoing, as you're pointing out, it requires ongoing affirmation within our legal system to keep functioning properly, and people have engaged in commitments or obligations to each other under the current law that if this came to pass, it'd be like, well, things are different now.
Right. And somebody would probably have to sue to at least grandfather in, if you will, all of the people who were already married. Right. And then there would be a question of like, okay, can they stop it going forward, but recognize the people who already are? It would be such a mess. Like, why go there? Why go there? If you have two loving, consenting adults who want to be together, like, why on earth does the state need to be getting into this?
Okay, look. You got to bear with me because I am not well thought out on these things. What I'm trying to understand is what I asked Representative Scott, and I've asked a couple other people, is like, okay, look, is it the rights you want? Because Representative Scott was essentially saying it's like the word woman for her. She was like, I don't want to call somebody a woman unless I believe it's a biological woman and it's a word. And she was saying, look, for her religious views, for her position in life, she doesn't want to say marriage unless it's a man and woman. I'm like, okay, great. That's your position. Understood. And what I've been trying to find out is, okay, well then are you against like right of survivorship and like having, joint custody of children and, like being all of these different things that come with legally being married, being granted to like married 2.0 or like civil unions or whatever it might be. Are you against the function that and the benefits that people get with being married, right? Or are you just against the word? And we were kind of chatting through it, but what I'm trying to find out also from same-sex couples is like, okay, is it the word marriage? Like, do you want the word marriage, or are you more concerned with like, look, call me whatever you want. Just make sure if I'm dying in that hospital room that my spouse can come in and see me, and that it's like, that, and if we've adopted children or if we got a donor or something, we have children together, that like, there's no question about that we're both parents. Like, do you want the function or do you want the word?
I don't think it's an either or. I think it's very much both. I mean, certainly all of the having coextensive legal rights is critical because it costs you a fortune to even try to replicate all of the things you get automatically when you get married. And some of them, and so many of them you can't. I mean, you'd have to pay a lawyer, over $100,000 to even just try to construct all of the things when you got married. I'm married. We instantly got kind of, rights of survivorship, and we got to co-own all our house. We didn't have to hire lawyers to do all that. It just happened. But if you had to independently contract for all that, it would cost you a fortune. And a lot of it you never could do. There's no lawyer you could ever hire that would get you the ability to get your spouse's Social Security payments or their veterans benefits or, all the things that come with that. So certainly there's a real money component, frankly.
Sure, that makes sense.
But so the legal rights are critical in being able to make your, you'd have to hire a power of attorney and a power of medical ability, all that stuff.
Okay. So the function granted and to replace that would be a fortune. So the function is
irreplaceable. So there's a major kind of legal and economic component, but it does go beyond that. There's also, I think people don't want the stigma of saying, okay, even if I have all the same inheritance rights, why shouldn't I get married? That's a thing that's been recognized in humanity for thousands of years as like the ultimate blessing of your bond with your lifetime partner. And I think they rightly are like, why should I have this stigmatized mini version? Like, why should I have to deal with having a civil union when straight people get a real marriage? Why should you get this kind of off-brand version of commitment that, that even if it carries the same, legal rights, you're not entitled to that special word marriage. It's like, no, that you shouldn't have that. They shouldn't have this stigma and this separate thing. If they love each other and have made a lifelong commitment to each other, they should be able to call themselves married. So I think it's both. I think they would be pissed off, at least most people I know in this movement, and I'm pretty tied into it. They would not be happy if there was just some subordinate version where you get all the same legal rights, but you have to call it something different.
Why are we having these battles over words in our society? Like, I'm like, what is happening? And it really, and again, I'm not saying that position is right or wrong, or Representative Scott is right or wrong, like whatever. I'm just looking at all this like, wow, we have gotten into a battle over our language so incredibly. And there are people that are now like digging in with like, you're not taking my words. And, we had a Representative Hill last year passed the compulsory gender language bill that, within the public sphere, it's like, you cannot force someone to utter words that are counter to biological reality. And people were very upset about that. Some people were very happy about that. And it's like our language and getting people to force, the compulsion or non-compulsion of people to talk about things is really like, it's wild to me.
I don't know why we can't just be live and let live. I truly don't understand why, if you're a straight person, why do you care if two gay people want to get married? Why do you care if a person wants to change their gender? Why I don't get why people care so much about this. It's a mystery to me. It's like, and this whole like, you were born this, so you must be this forever. Like Butch Otter, our former governor, his real name isn't Butch Otter. It's like, I can't remember what it is.
I thought you were going to say he was born a woman. I was like,
didn't
see that coming.
It's like CL. Butch is his nickname. It's like Clement Lester or something. He's got some funky CL. I forgot what they stand for.
Butch was a good switch. Tom Cruise wasn't born Tom Cruise either, right?
But we can call him Butch Otter. He wants to be Butch Otter. Let's call him Butch Otter. I don't know why we don't see a whole bunch of people saying like, no, you must be Clement Lester. That is what we were going to call you, and we are not going to let you call yourself Butch. Like, why? He wants to be Butch. Let him be Butch. Like, let people live their best lives. Idaho used to be that. We used to be this very different brand, and I think true conservative. It was this live and let live. Get the government out of your business and let you live your life. And now it's just morphed into this whole micromanagement. We are going to cram you into our mold of what we think you should look like and how you should live your life. And it's very sad.
May I ask you something in good faith? I genuinely, I hear everything you just said. That the thing that I don't understand is we say, hey, get the government out of our lives. Yeah. Okay. I get it. So that means if I want to be a jerk and not call you by the pronoun you want, I should be able to do that because I'm a jerk.
Sure.
And like, I shouldn't lose your, like,
yeah.
Right. So with Representative Hill's bill, which was the compulsory gender, he was like, listen, if somebody asks me, I've never denied someone, or like I absolutely would observe whatever people prefer, but the idea that the government can force me to do it is really bad.
Well, you can be a jerk. I mean, usually the penalty is that you might not get invited to dinner parties and whatnot. But under the First Amendment, you have the right to be a jerk. Nobody.
But people got really mad about his thing, saying like, "Hey, the government has no role in forcing people under threat of punishment or firing within the public sphere to like engage in this speech." That was his thing, and a lot of people that were articulating your issue, which is like, why can't people just get on with it? It's like, yeah. I think that's a fair statement. Why can't people just like, what do you care? What do you care? Okay, great. That's fine. But at the same time, why does the government care? Like, why would the government come and have anything to say about what I'm doing? Like, why should I, if a 16-year-old, I say I'm a public school teacher and I'm not, say some 16-year-old comes and wants me to call the 16-year-old by a pronoun that's not in line with the 16-year-old's biological gender, which no 16-year-old has. Like, all this fictitious example, and I say no. If you were born a man, I'm going to call you he, him, right? Why would the government step in and be like, then we're going to fire you?
Well, I don't think that had ever happened. I think this was a real ginned up thing.
Yeah, sure. It could have been. Yeah.
But I mean, there is a little bit of a different legal area where you're talking about, because essentially government speech where the person's on our paycheck and is doing this stuff. And it's, and so would we want a teacher intentionally insulting people? Let's say it was the other way, they're intentionally misgendering a non-trans kid, right? I mean, I have a son. Let's say a teacher was just coming in and calling my son her all the time. Like, I think that they could say, stop doing that.
I think, don't you think it relies on a philosophical principle that people vary on, which is one person believes that you can change your gender and the other person doesn't. So it comes down to a political and philosophical belief system that some people just don't want to participate in.
I guess, but it's one person's actual life, and it's the other person's just, kibitzing from the outside. I feel like the person whose actual life it is probably has precedence.
It's entirely possible. I have heard it described as, look, this may be the life that you feel you want to live, but you're also asking me to participate with my life and my utterance, and that I no longer have control over what I think. And again, these are arguments that I've heard, and like, I hear what you're saying and I hear what other people are saying. And it's so curious to me that we've gotten into this gigantic argument over like, I feel this way and I require your participation in either like in the marriage or the pronouns. It's like everybody wants, different groups want different control of different words. And it's so bonkers. It's like, how did we get here?
I feel like we're looking at very different levels of what the entitlements and freedom should be when you have one side that's saying, I want to marry the person I love and be with them.
Yeah.
And the other person saying, I want to stop you from being able to do that. I feel like the person who's actually in the marriage and deciding who they're going to marry should have more say in that decision than the person who's just completely on the outside and saying, I don't want to see you married to somebody else. Like, that doesn't feel like they're in it in the same way that they should have the same precedence.
No argument there.
And that's really what we're seeing is they're saying like, I think, okay, you are the person who is transgender and says, I want to change my name. I want to go through sex changes and that. I want to change my driver's license. That's their life. They're making the decision on how to live their life. And then you have somebody else coming in and saying, nope, I don't think you should be allowed to do that. I don't think you should be allowed to change your driver's license. I don't think you should be allowed to change your name. I don't think you should. So again, that does not feel like they are exercising the same entitlement to freedom that the person whose actual life it is.
Okay. So just and again, I don't have any answers or really like good thoughts on this. I do think that the marriage, that what I heard Representative Scott say was not that she was going to be upset. And again, perhaps I didn't understand her correctly, but I heard she was like, listen, I just don't want to use the word marriage. Like she was like, I haven't thought through all the benefits of being married, but like at first glance, I don't really think like I would have a problem with somebody, two consenting adults being engaged in a relationship that yielded these things. I'm more concerned with the word marriage as a religious objection, right? So,
but she wants to use the law to do that. So it's one thing if her own private life says, like, I don't want to refer to them as married. but she wants to actually use the law to stop them from being
Yeah,
beggars. Is a whole different thing, right? I mean, and that's where I really have a problem with people taking their unique individual beliefs and trying to turn it into law. Like, I'm Jewish. I'm not particularly observant, but there are.
I'm a bad Jew, but I'm a Jew.
Exactly. But I mean, there are a lot of observant
Yeah.
Jews who believe that God said you're not supposed to eat shellfish and you're not supposed to eat dairy with meat, and that God is against cheeseburgers and shrimp and all that. Okay, that's how they live their lives. They don't eat cheeseburgers, they don't eat shrimp, but they're not trying to come in and pass a law banning cheeseburgers and shrimp. And that's really where we see the line. Like, if it's your religion, go live your religion. God bless, enjoy. But it really becomes a problem when they try to take over the reins of law and force everybody else into it.
Yeah. Look, this is complex, and again, I hear what you're saying. That and the transgender. I haven't heard anybody in the state of Idaho say like, "Hey, look, if you're over 18, like." And again, I'm sure people are saying this. I just haven't heard it. But if I haven't heard people say, "Hey, look, if you're over 18, you shouldn't be able to do whatever you want."
I have. I've seen laws that do that. I mean, I've seen laws trying to ban, changing the gender marker on your driver's license, for example, and trying to ban you from actually being able to go through the legal procedures. We saw a law basically banning people from being able to get gender confirmation treatment under the state health insurance plan, for example.
Yeah, what I meant is if somebody wants to get surgery and take gender reassignment surgery if they're over 18, I hadn't heard somebody saying they shouldn't be able to do that. Now, when the state gets involved and saying, first off, should taxpayer dollars be funding that? Okay, I understand that's an argument. Should we be able to do under the eyes of the law, or even on a driver's license, like you get in a big car accident and they're like, okay, we have 2 females in the car, and paramedics show up, they're like, okay, this is not 2 female, or like you go to the hospital. I mean, look, I don't know all the details. What I'm saying is, I haven't heard people saying, hey, look, if I go up and I'm like, I got $10,000, can you do some stuff to me? And people will be like, yeah, like, come on in, here we go. But to the degree that people are saying, hey, what portion of my tax dollars are going to you to get that surgery? I don't personally agree with that. You can do whatever you want on your own free time with your own dollar. Just don't take our tax dollars. I absolutely have heard that argument from people. So what I was just saying is, I don't hear people saying like, you shouldn't be able to get like a nose job or like, get whatever plastic surgery you want.
Yeah, well, I think the thing where they're trying to ban you from being able to change your birth certificate or no, your driver's license, I kind of feel that gets into the range of kind of stopping you from actually living your life on your own terms. And, then you're using the wheels of government to try to really control how people are living their lives.
How do we get a smaller government? How do we do this?
How
do we do this?
My philosophy, and I know I'm in the very small minority of Democrats, but I truly believe that my philosophy is probably a lot more in line with the average person, is that, government is at its best when it is providing efficient, quality services that we kind of need to have on a collective basis that no person can do on their own. Things like building roads and highways and public schools and, big things that none of us have the money to do on our own. When they do that well and effectively and efficiently, that is good government. And government is at its worst when it's getting in your business and telling you how to live your private life in a way that's not affecting others. And I feel like we have that completely upside down in Idaho right now, where they're just like, eliminate the public services that everybody needs, spend as little as possible on the roads and the highways, don't fix the bridges, underfund the public schools, but go all in on telling people how to live their private lives and, what books they're allowed to read, and banning drag shows, banning what clothes you can wear, banning all this stuff. It just feels very upside down in terms of where we should have government and where we shouldn't have government.
I had Representative Church in this morning, in fact, as well as a week or two ago, and she said something that really stuck with me, which was like, this is the West. Like, Idaho is the West. Yeah. Like, it used to be the Wild West, and it was live and let live. And it was like, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. You do your thing, love your neighbor, but don't get in there. That's their thing. You keep with your thing. Like, have good fences, have good neighbors. Like, just let it go. And I have not been able to stop thinking about that. Like, she's right. This is the West. Like, we were the Wild West where anything went, and you just kind of did your own thing. And again, I'm still very much learning every day about the state, and God bless it. I love every second of it. It is interesting. It's like, what happened? Like, what happened? Was it the change? Have we changed? Did the rest of the world change? Did the rest of the country change? Did the markers change? Like, a lot of problems that I found in my former state, and you hear people say this all the time. It's like, listen, my position on things didn't change. the world around me changed. And it was like, I was sitting in the center, I was right here, and then the world moved, and all of a sudden I'm outside of the circle, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, I didn't change. You guys just all moved in this other direction. Like, what has happened in Idaho, do you think?
I have no idea. And I agree 5,000%. And I like, those were the days. I wish we had a live and
Those
let
were
live
the days.
But I mean, it is funny. Like, I consider myself kind of a fiscal conservative. And now the world has changed to this wild place where all of a sudden the conservative thing to do is to just like cut giant checks with no accountability to private schools and to do all these things. I'm like, and to, give giant tax cuts before we even know if we have any money. I mean, but the definitions have shifted around me, but I feel like I'm kind of the same where I always was. Consider myself fiscally conservative, which apparently now makes me a wild, leftist Democrat or something for wanting to pay the bills and have police and fire departments and stuff.
And you are a wild lady. Wild lady. My God. Listen, Representative Rubel, I appreciate you. I have enjoyed this again. We just knocked out like three good things. Let's do this. Let's line up another one because in 2 weeks, and because I guarantee you by the time you come back, something else crazy is going to happen. I did not know that I did speak with Representative Redmond earlier this week. I did not know that he was bringing the Medicaid. I thought he was doing like just inserting like a work requirement. I didn't know all that background. I hopefully will be able to talk to him again in like another week or two. So maybe I'll connect with him before I see you next. And we can keep the conversation going. Anything else we should be looking for? Any like heads up on things?
Oh, mandatory Bible in schools coming Friday.
I talked to him about that. I talked to him about that. Yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of fun things. We will have a lot to talk about next time.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for what you're doing for Idaho. Thank you for coming in today. And we'll see you again soon.
Looking forward to it.